What was the very first thing you did when you went into work today?
The very first thing I did was grab a cup of coffee. I'll take a few minutes to chit-chat with my coworkers to see how their weekend was. Just small talk to start the day, very lighthearted. And then just go through my emails, check my calendar to make sure I don't have any meetings or to see what I have scheduled for that day. So typically my calendar is always right in front of me, attached to my email, and I would just start going through emails. I usually don't have any unread messages. That's one of my pet peeves, is to have thousands or hundreds of unread messages. So I at least have to go through them. And if I don't respond right away, I mark it as unread so that I can respond to them later on.
Did you have any pressing emails today or any meetings or anything first thing in the morning?
I had a meeting just to discuss on how to proceed with this project and what needs to be done on both sides. We have a meeting at their facility half an hour away, so me and the CEO will be heading towards there this afternoon.
What stage is the project in?
We've probably been involved in it for a little bit over 2 months, going back and forth with the client, make sure that we're all on the same page. So we typically have these meetings twice a month to go over there and to present what we've done. So I would have to usually make a little presentation the prior week, go over it with my CEO, and then present that to the client.
What are you going over in these presentations, though? Is it all just like drawing updates?
Drawing updates, and also this is a team project for my company, so we would go over what we've charged them this week, come to an agreement that they'll be able to pay those bills.
Is there like a timeline laid out as far as like when they expect you to have the project done?
They gave us a budget of what they want to spend, but timeline 6 months out. There are certain things done that we can't proceed without finishing up one thing, and then there's another client that's also involved. We're working with multiple clients for one solution, so sometimes we have to wait for another client for their feedback before we can proceed to move forward.
Are the other clients like subcontractors? Are you guys like designing the barge, but you need like the engine supplier or something like that?
Yeah, so we also have another client doing some calculations for us. They have another software called ANSYS, so sometimes we don't have the capabilities of running that software, so we would forward this calculation to another client for them to do it for us, and then we review their calculations before proceeding.
You guys are handling all the design drawings and stuff like that, though, right?
That's correct.
How did the meeting actually go today?
It went well. We went there. We would always go there right after lunch. Sometimes we would have lunch with clients, just small talk. And then I would go there and present the presentation of what we've done the past couple of weeks. It was pretty smooth. There were very few questions towards the end. So far, they like what we're doing. We're meeting all the deadlines, hitting all the milestones.
Is 6 months a typical time frame to have something as big as like a barge or a ship? Is that the time from initial design concept till having something built, or is that just like the design phase?
Just the design phase. Having something built takes time. And then once we have like the design finalized, we would also have to go out and figure out who could actually build it. We have to figure out what shipyards are open, going out trying to find like the cheapest shipyard, what would be the most cost effective to the client. The design phase is always the beginning, of course. Once you start actually building it, it depends on how soon the client wants it, the amount of workers that shipyard has, who's going to be there. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it.
I think you were saying the other day that a lot of times you are still involved in the construction phase because sometimes they need to ask you questions or stop by and make sure the thing's being built right, correct?
That's correct. Sometimes where the drawing might not make sense to them, there's interference or it's not lining up correctly. So any questions that they have concerning part of the drawing during like the building stage or even like the design stage is always common towards it, that we always issue new revisions so that everything's up to date, documented, and all the emails are documented. So it's always good to have a chain of emails so that you have proof of what they want to change for any legal purposes if something goes wrong.
Did you do anything else after that meeting?
Yeah, so we went back to the office. I then summarized the meeting into like a Word document, and then I put that up into the shared drive so that all my other employees could have access to it so that they know what's going on in the meeting. And of course, if they have any questions, they could just walk over right to my desk. And then I would also notify my admin all the money got approved so that she could start doing her thing in the HR department.
Did you do anything else after that?
I just went back to continue making any corrections and any changes that the client wanted, going back through all the comments that I made throughout the presentation, answering them, and then sending another email summarizing the notes so that they also have a copy of what we did, what we talked about, what was discussed.
What specifically did they request as far as changes? I mean, if you could talk about that.
They wanted to increase the length of the barge. They wanted to add more LNG for this, so they wanted to increase the size of the barge. So then my designer, one of the main guys who does all of our AutoCAD drawings, so of course I would have to present this information to him as well, because he's the one that's assisting. Because I would draw it mainly by hand if I don't have time to draw it on Rhino. So then he would make modifications for me because he's very proficient. That's basically his main job, is to do all the CAD drawings for us, so the 3D modeling drawings for us, if I don't have time to mess around with it.
What kind of software are you using to make those drawings?
We're using GHS, which is a hydrostatic software. We're able to model the ship in 2D using that software, and also we're using Rhino 3D rendering.
So you specifically aren't like super heavy into the design, into the CAD work. You guys have somebody else that typically does that sort of stuff.
Well, we're expected to do our own drawings, but we have a designer that's his main job, is to do these drawings if we're overloaded with doing calculations or have meetings. And plus, he's been there for over 30 years, so he's very reliable. He knows his stuff. So any questions that I have with any 3D software, 2D, he's always there to help me out, because I don't know everything. I don't work on AutoCAD on a daily basis like he does.
He does nothing but CAD design. Does he have a degree in engineering?
No, he does not have an engineering degree. So he basically just took the drafts classes, and I think he's got his associate. But anything that he designs, that he creates in AutoCAD, always has to be approved by another engineer like myself or any other engineer. So as long as an engineer signs off on his drawing, then it's good to go.
Gotcha. So would you call him more of like a drafter, maybe?
I would say like a designer.
Did you do anything else after that?
By this time, it's already towards the end of the day. So just, again, checking my emails. Another client was asking about his ballasting study, which is another project that I've also been working on. They gave us basically a chart of when the tanks are being filled and emptied. So we just have to make sure that their ballasting plan would work. So this is something that we would also do in GHS, is to model this particular ship with their ballasting plans of which fuel tank is filled, which one is emptied. So you go basically, you ballast the entire ship, make sure that it's not going to be leaning over to one side so that it doesn't capsize.
Are you doing all those calculations in the software? Is it kind of like FEA or?
Yeah, everything's done in the software. We just have to basically put the inputs in there, and then it spits it out for us. Yeah, with GHS, it's pretty simple programming, but not too many people use it, so kind of old school, but it works.
Do you have to like put different amounts, kind of just make a whole variety of inputs for it, and then see how the system responds or the ship responds?
Yeah, they gave us their ship drawings, so then our job was to model their ship into this GHS program, and then start filling up these tanks with their load conditions. We would present them back with, okay, it's going to trim a certain degree or heal a certain degree, so that we could adjust the loads in each tank.
I can kind of get how you can simulate a ship with containers containing different amounts of solids or liquids. Is the program able to simulate the water, like the ocean, the waves, and any kind of weather that you might incur?
There's the option to put that in there. We always put the worst case scenario. So we would go through the history of, okay, if this barge is going to be traveling from point A to point B, we would look at that route and go through the history of, okay, typically how high are these waves during this time, or what's the weather like, what's the wind like, and we basically go the very worst case scenario.
Do you guys ever have like ship prototypes that you take out and people test on the open sea and then note like, okay, is it doing well? Is it not doing well? Or are ships like just too expensive? You can't really afford to do that.
These ships, they're big. So yeah, having a prototype, that'd be a good practice, but I guess we would have to scale everything down to the prototype size, but we haven't. We just basically did all the design work via the calculations and the software, and I guess it hasn't failed us yet. I'm sure there's other companies out there that might have their design like a big yacht or something, or a cruise ship. They might have smaller prototypes that they're testing, but I'm not really sure about that.
I would just think that with a large ship, it costs way more money than a car or even a small boat. You probably can't afford to like make prototypes and then just scrap them. Yeah,
because I worked on nuclear submarines as well, and when those things are being built, it's hard for me to imagine a smaller prototype. There's millions of components on there. Just to mimic that to a smaller scale, I think that's a lot of work.
Sounds like you guys in this industry at least have to rely on the computer software to produce the final product.
Yeah.
Now, as far as that, like the plumbing and the wiring and stuff that goes into these ships, does somebody else handle that?
Yeah, we have another subcontractor who's doing that type of work as well. But sometimes we have to do it, so it depends on our workload, like doing like the HVAC system, the ventilation, seawater systems. It really depends on our workload. And also, maybe the client already has somebody else who's also doing the system portion of it, and they just want us to design the barge. Of course, we would have to work with another client to make sure that the system will fit into our design. There's a lot of meetings, a lot of back and forth emails, a few groups for one common goal.
How does working for a small company and a large company compare?
Working for a larger company, you might get lost. I enjoy working for a smaller company because you know everybody, you know the CEO, you know everybody on a personal level. Working for a larger company, you might get lost in the mix. I used to work for the government. People just sometimes they're not really do anything. Nobody knows because there's so many people. I think working for a smaller firm, you know what everybody else is doing, which is good because it keeps you motivated to do well, because you can't just sit back and just not do really anything. You have to show proof that you're part of the company, and I think having a smaller company, everybody's just closer together.
Sounds like you like the smaller company better. With a bigger company, are people typically going to only have like one job, like designing this part of the ship?
Exactly. So working for a smaller company, I do a lot more different type of jobs because the job that comes in is always something different. But working for a larger company, I'll be doing the same thing every single day for months at a time, reviewing drawings, reviewing documents months at a time. It gets kind of tedious or repetitive. Working for a smaller company, the work is so much different, keeps it more interesting, more fun.
Were you ever able to talk to your employer when you were with a big company, whether it was the government or just another big company? Were you ever able to talk to them and say like, hey, I'd like a little more variety or something in my job?
I did. I would talk to my supervisor saying I feel kind of bored, kind of different. But then he was like, okay, let me see what I can do. But it would take like months to figure out, okay, he's got to put me in a different position, different role. But it always takes time because he's going to have approval from the guy above him. Who needs approval from the guy above them? So it's like 5 or 6 another levels of supervisor above him. And I feel like working for a smaller company, everybody's almost equal, besides, of course, the CEO. But everybody's always like on the same level.